After dozens of controversial theories, the black box of the ill-fated Air India Flight 171 has finally been decoded, revealing a stunning truth about what really happened in those horrific final seconds. What's about to be exposed will profoundly haunt you, as the cause of this tragedy lies in a shocking intersection of human instinct and a critical design flaw. The twilight calm of a bustling urban landscape was not broken by the familiar, distant hum of an aircraft ascending gracefully into the night sky, but by an ear-splitting shriek, a sound so violent, so utterly unnatural, it seemed to tear at the very fabric of the air itself. This raw, guttural cry was instantly followed by an abrupt, terrifying silence, a stillness far more profound and chilling than any noise could possibly be. It was on that fateful evening that Air India Flight 171, a magnificent Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, a symbol of national pride and technological prowess, had simply vanished from the radar. Not somewhere over an unforgiving expanse of ocean, but in the most shocking of circumstances, mere heartbeats after lifting off from the runway. Its climb tragically, inexplicably, severed. The ensuing impact, a cataclysmic event of unimaginable force, sent seismic tremors through the very ground, transforming a vibrant residential area into an unrecognizable landscape of twisted metal, scorched earth, and a horror that defied all human comprehension. Within moments, the sky above what had only moments before been a lively neighborhood was choked with thick, acrid smoke, a monstrous, dark plume rising defiantly against the rapidly fading light. It was an indelible, grim tableau, painting a portrait of utter devastation that would forever be etched into the collective memory of a nation. The air, once filled with the mundane sounds of evening life, distant traffic, children's laughter echoing from playgrounds, the quiet murmur of conversations drifting from open windows, was now pierced by the desperate, wailing symphony of sirens, a relentless, mournful cry of urgency that mingled with the raw, panic screams of eyewitnesses and the dazed, disbelieving members of those who had seen the impossible. Over 200 souls, men, women, and children, each with their own unique stories, their own destinations, their own futures woven into the intricate tapestry of life, had been aboard that flight. Their journeys, their cherished dreams, their very existence, extinguished in a terrifying flash of fire and an unfathomable, crushing force. On the ground, the toll tragically mounted, adding to the already unbearable weight of loss, as the debris of a once magnificent aircraft rained down on unsuspecting lives, leaving behind a trail of destruction that spread far beyond the immediate impact zone, touching every corner of the community and reverberating across the nation. The initial hours were a maelstrom of barely controlled chaos, raw, unbridled grief, and frantic, desperate action. First responders, their faces etched with grim determination and shock under the harsh, flickering glare of emergency lights, moved with a haunting solemnity through the wreckage. It was no longer a typical residential area, but a surreal, fragmented landscape of charred remains, of personal belongings, a child's brightly colored toy, a half-read book, a single, discarded shoe, scattered like macabre confetti across the devastation, each item a poignant whisper of a life irrevocably altered or tragically ended. The sheer, overwhelming scale of the disaster was almost paralyzing. Homes reduced to skeletal ruins, vehicles mangled beyond recognition, and the chilling, pervasive silence that inevitably follows such a deafening, final end. Yet, even as the heroic search and rescue efforts unfolded, even as the community grappled with the immediate, visceral pain, a more insidious, gnawing question began to creep into the collective consciousness, a question that would soon haunt a nation, the insatiable, agonizing need to understand why. Why this specific flight? Why here, so devastatingly close to the supposed sanctuary of home? What unspeakable, unseen force could have brought down a state-of-the-art aircraft just moments after it had gracefully embraced the sky? As the first defiant rays of dawn struggled to pierce the smoke-laden air on a morning that felt anything but new, anything but normal, the questions multiplied with agonizing rapidity, each more unbearable than the last. Experts, seasoned aviation pundits, and legions of armchair detectives across the globe scrambled for answers, their voices filling the airwaves and news feeds, their theories echoing in hushed conversations in living rooms and cafes. With every passing hour, a myriad of controversial theories began to emerge, swirling like vultures over the still smoldering wreckage, each vying for credibility, each adding another dense, perplexing layer to the already thick fog of uncertainty. Was it a catastrophic mechanical failure? A hidden, insidious flaw within the cutting-edge Dreamliner itself that had finally manifested with deadly, undeniable consequences? A design flaw perhaps overlooked in the ruthless pursuit of innovation? Or was it an unthinkable act of human error? A fatal misjudgment in the cockpit during the most critical, unforgiving phase of flight, where even a slight deviation could spell disaster for hundreds? Some whispered of external forces, an unforeseen environmental factor, a freak, unprecedented gust of wind, or even a massive bird strike, though the latter seemed almost unfathomable for such a large, modern jet to succumb so completely, so swiftly, its powerful engines silenced without warning. Darker, more chilling speculation also surfaced, murmurs of more sinister plots, of deliberate sabotage, a calculated act of terror, or even sophisticated cyber interference, though such claims were often quickly, and perhaps too readily, dismissed by official channels, eager to avoid widespread panic and maintain public order. The media, both national and international, descended upon the scene like a relentless swarm, their cameras capturing every grim detail, the microphones thrust into the faces of grieving families, their voices trembling with shock, and the stoic, overwhelmed officials struggling valiantly to maintain composure amidst the profound, overwhelming grief. A nation held its collective breath, captivated and horrified by the unfolding tragedy, desperate for clarity, for a definitive, undeniable explanation that could, perhaps, begin to soothe the raw, gaping wound of loss and provide some semblance of closure. The pressure on the investigation team was immense, almost unbearable, a monumental, Herculean task laid before them, to sift through the charred wreckage, piece by painstaking piece, to gather every single fragment of evidence, no matter how small, how seemingly insignificant. The fate of hundreds of lives, and indeed, the very reputation and perceived safety of air travel itself, hinged precariously on their ability to penetrate the impenetrable veil of mystery. The answer, they knew, lay hidden somewhere within the devastation, within the silent, unyielding evidence of the crash site, waiting to be found, waiting to be meticulously decoded. And for now, amidst the shattered lives, the lingering stench of ash, and the profound, unbearable weight of the unknown, the only certainty that remained was the desperate, collective yearning for the unvarnished truth. The first rays of a grief-stricken dawn barely pierced the thick pall of smoke still hanging heavy over the devastation, painting the scene in a macabre palette of charcoal and ash. Amidst the twisted metal and smoldering ruins that had been a vibrant community, a new, desperate hope began to materialize. A day after the unimaginable tragedy that brought Air India Flight 171 crashing down, amidst the charred wreckage and the silent, profound sorrow, the dedicated investigation team discovered an anomaly. High above the immediate impact zone, perched precariously on the scorched roof of a hospital dormitory building chillingly close to the scene, was a flash of defiant color, a bright orange object, remarkably undisturbed. It was the black box, or more precisely, the Flight Data Recorder, FDR, a device so crucial it was universally recognized as the singular key to unlocking the mystery of the horror that had unfolded. Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu, his voice heavy with the weight of national grief, had publicly declared it the only key piece that can help the world understand what just happened. Indeed, for aviation investigators, the FDR was nothing short of the aircraft's unblinking witness, a silent chronicler of every operational behavior, every nuance of control, every flicker of data from the Boeing's final, agonizing moments. Though colloquially known as a black box, this device was intentionally painted in a vivid, almost shocking orange, a beacon designed to scream its presence from amidst the debris of any catastrophe. Crafted from super durable materials like steel or titanium, it was engineered to withstand the most extreme high temperatures and the most crushing impacts, a testament to its singular purpose. Its strategic placement in the tail of the aircraft, statistically the least damaged position in a collision, proved prescient. The black box of Flight 171 was found in an astonishingly intact condition, a miracle amidst the surrounding desolation. Without delay, the precious device was meticulously secured and immediately transported to the analysis center of the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau of India. This was no ordinary analysis. It proceeded under the special supervision of the government and a consortium of international experts, their faces grimly determined, their collective gaze fixed on the secrets held within its robust casing. Information from the Directorate General of Civil Aviation of India hinted at a time frame. Results could be completed within a mere 2 to 4 days if the analysis was conducted domestically. However, the involvement of the aircraft manufacturer, Boeing, or engine manufacturer General Electric from the United States, as was likely for such a complex investigation, could extend the painstaking process from 10 to 15 days. For many days and nights, the technical team worked tirelessly, their focus unwavering, extracting every line of data, every minute detail from the black box's intricate memory. The air in the analysis center was thick with anticipation, tinged with the sobering weight of the lives lost. Then, gradually, the first clues began to emerge, faint whispers that promised to unveil the terrifying mystery of this horrific tragedy. Upon examining the raw information, analysts found something unexpected, yet profoundly telling. In the final data segment of the FDR, Air India Flight 171, in its critical initial phase of ascent, was, by all recorded parameters, still in a stable climb. The aircraft had maintained a reasonable speed. Its climb angle was perfectly correct, and crucially, there were no abnormalities whatsoever recorded in its flight systems, no warning lights, no mechanical fluctuations, no hint of impending doom. This period of normalcy persisted until exactly the 15th second after takeoff. It was precisely at that 15-second mark, a mere fraction of a breath into what should have been a routine ascent, that the data abruptly shifted. Suddenly, a strange and utterly inexplicable movement was recorded. The captain's seat, at position 1 in the cockpit, slid sharply backward by nearly 30 centimeters in an instant. This was a movement so violent, so unexpected, it defied the very protocols of a secured cockpit. Immediately, in what could only be interpreted as an instinctive, desperate reaction to this sudden, disorienting displacement, the left thrust lever, controlling engine number 1, was pulled back to its extreme. Less than half a second later, with terrifying swiftness, the right thrust lever was also pulled. Both engines, once roaring with the full power of takeoff, were almost completely shut down, their immense thrust instantly brought to an idle state. The silence from the engines in the data, following the preceding calm and then sudden lurch, was deafening in its implications, setting the stage for the horrifying seconds that would follow. The data from the flight data recorder, though cold and numerical, had already painted a chilling picture. A perfectly stable ascent, then the inexplicable lurch of the captain's seat, followed by the catastrophic, instantaneous pulling back of both thrust levers. But the true, visceral horror of Air India Flight 171's final seconds was not merely recorded in lines of code. It was etched into the desperate, agonized sounds captured by the cockpit voice recorder. These were the chilling revelations that would peel back the layers of technical malfunction and expose the raw, human terror of a plummeting aircraft. At precisely the 18th second after takeoff, the CVR registered a sound that sent a jolt of ice through the seasoned investigators, a guttural, panicked yell from a co-pilot. It wasn't a question, nor a warning, but a raw, desperate exclamation of disbelief and terror. Lost thrust. The two words hung in the air, echoing the abrupt silence from the massive engines that had just moments before been roaring with the full, unyielding power of a Dreamliner ascending into the night. It was the sound of a professional, suddenly stripped of control, confronted by an impossible, nightmarish reality. The sudden cessation of power, just when maximum thrust was needed most, defied all training, all expectation. Immediately after the co-pilot's desperate cry, the captain's voice, equally strained but with a terrifying clarity, sliced through the growing cacophony of alarms that must have begun blaring in the cockpit. "My seat," he exclaimed, his words a desperate, fragmented explanation for his sudden, involuntary action, a horrifying acknowledgement of the chain of events that had just been triggered. The data had shown his seat sliding backward by nearly 30 centimeters in an instant, a movement that had undoubtedly thrown him off balance, instinctively sending his hands flailing for something, anything, to steady himself. And in that terrifying, disorienting lurch, his hands had tragically found and pulled back the very levers that controlled the aircraft's propulsion. By the 26th second, a mere 8 agonizing seconds after the co-pilot's first terrified cry, the CVR confirmed the unspeakable. Both engines, the powerful hearts of the Boeing 787, had stopped completely. The aircraft, designed to be a marvel of modern engineering, capable of flying on a single engine in an emergency, was now rendered a gargantuan, gliding steel mass, its forward momentum rapidly decaying, its destiny dictated solely by the brutal, unforgiving laws of physics. At that exact moment, the altitude reading from the FDR delivered another crushing blow. The aircraft was only about 65 meters above the ground. 65 meters, an almost impossibly low height for any chance of recovery, a mere breath away from the unsuspecting world below. In that terrifying, fleeting instant, as the Boeing became nothing more than a falling behemoth, a desperate scream tore through the recorder, raw and unbridled, conveying the utter hopelessness of their situation. Mayday. No thrust. Lost power. Cannot climb. It was Captain Sumit Sabharwal, his voice laced with the primal fear of a man confronting the inevitable, transmitting an emergency signal to air traffic control. The call was a stark, urgent plea for help, a final, futile attempt to avert the impending catastrophe, to warn those on the ground of the horror descending upon them. Air traffic control, immediately recognizing the gravity of the emergency, responded with swift, professional urgency, asking for an update, desperate for any shred of information that could guide them, any instruction they could relay. But their call was met only with silence. The focus in the cockpit, as the aircraft plunged toward the ground, shifted entirely to handling the unfathomable emergency. Every second was an eternity. Every micro-adjustment of control surfaces a desperate, futile prayer against gravity's relentless pull. The pilots, highly skilled and trained for every conceivable scenario, found themselves facing an impossible one, a state-of-the-art aircraft stripped of its power, rendered helpless by a chain of events triggered by a seemingly simple, yet tragically critical, malfunction. The sounds in the cockpit grew more frantic, the alarms a deafening chorus, the voices a desperate symphony of command and terror. And then, at the agonizing 38th second after takeoff, with a final, chilling abruptness, it all ended. The recording cut out. The connection was severed. The dream of Flight 171, and the lives aboard, became a nightmare, ending in a thunderous impact that shattered not only structures but the very sense of security that underpinned modern air travel. The black box had faithfully recorded every horrific detail, now poised to reveal the full, unvarnished truth of those final, agonizing moments. After days of painstaking analysis, sifting through the data extracted from the black box and meticulously examining every fragment of debris from the crash site, a shocking and almost unbelievable conclusion gradually emerged. The horrific root of the Air India Flight 171 tragedy, claiming over 200 lives in a mere 38 seconds, began not with a complex system failure, not with external interference, but with the pilot's seat itself. Immediately after the aircraft commenced its climb, the captain's seat, a component seemingly as innocuous and firmly fixed as any other in the cockpit, unexpectedly slid sharply backward. This movement, so sudden and disorienting, was beyond unusual. It was an occurrence that should almost never happen if the locking pin, a seemingly minor but critically important mechanism, functioned correctly. The investigation drilled down into this bewildering detail. According to an examination of the debris recovered from the scene, the culprit was identified. The locking pin for the seat's guide rail was broken. What proved to be even more concerning, indeed, downright alarming, was the discovery that this very pin had a history. It had malfunctioned and, critically, had been repaired only 11 days prior to the fateful flight. Yet, in a glaring oversight that would ultimately carry a catastrophic price, no post-repair tests were conducted to ensure its safety, its stability, or its proper functioning under operational stress. This omission was directly implicated as the reason why, when the pilot took his seat and the aircraft began its ascent, the critical incident occurred, triggering the chain of events that culminated in disaster. The revelation sent a shudder through the aviation world, but for those intimately familiar with industry incidents, it was not an entirely isolated event. An alarming and disturbingly similar precedent had occurred just months prior, in March 2024, when LATAM Airlines experienced an almost identical incident. In that terrifying scenario, a sliding seat aboard one of their aircraft caused it to suddenly lose altitude, an event that, while not leading to a crash, resulted in severe injuries to 50 passengers, with 12 requiring hospitalization. The parallels were chilling, a seemingly simple, static piece of cockpit furniture, malfunctioning in a critical phase of flight, leading to a sudden, unexpected change in the aircraft's behavior. Both cases screamed a profound, serious flaw not just in specific component design, but in the broader aviation maintenance and safety inspection procedures that were supposed to prevent such recurrences. The question that now haunted investigators, experts, and the shell-shocked public alike was one of profound bewilderment. How could a seat, a simple device that should be firmly locked and utterly immobile in the cockpit, be allowed to move freely, particularly when the plane was flying in its most dangerous and dynamically demanding phase? Why was this fundamental safety mechanism susceptible to failure due to a mere loose pin issue, especially after a recent repair? Furthermore, a more fundamental, almost philosophical question arose. Why did the Boeing 787, a marvel of modern aerospace engineering, apparently lack built-in measures to prevent unconscious pilot input, particularly when such a scenario, a pilot being suddenly thrown off balance and instinctively reacting, could be considered a foreseeable, if rare, event? Such design vulnerabilities, if proven, spoke volumes about a systemic oversight, a chasm between design philosophy and real-world human behavior under stress. The tragedy of Air India Flight 171, therefore, was quickly understood to be anything but unprecedented in the annals of aviation. While unique in its precise manifestation, the underlying vulnerability, a seemingly minor technical detail capable of triggering catastrophic outcomes, had been observed before. Aviation history, as investigators well knew, was tragically replete with accidents triggered by seemingly harmless actions, by technical details that, on the surface, appeared incapable of causing fatalities. These weren't grand, complex system failures, but insidious weaknesses in the interwoven fabric of human interaction with advanced machinery. The sliding seat of Flight 171, therefore, became a stark emblem of a wider, more disturbing pattern, pointing towards systemic issues that demanded urgent scrutiny beyond the immediate wreckage, and setting the stage for a deeper dive into historical parallels that underscored this frightening truth. The horrifying conclusion that the Air India Flight 171 tragedy began with the pilot seat itself, a seemingly innocuous component, sent shockwaves through the aviation world. Yet, for those steeped in the grim history of air disasters, this wasn't an entirely unprecedented scenario. Aviation history, a chronicle often written in blood and shattered metal, has recorded numerous accidents triggered by seemingly harmless actions, by technical details that, on the surface, appeared incapable of causing mass fatalities. These weren't always the grand, complex system failures one might imagine, but insidious weaknesses in the interwoven fabric of human interaction with advanced machinery, where minor oversight could unravel into utter catastrophe. A chillingly typical example, still fresh in the collective memory, is the saga of the Boeing 737 Maximum. The crashes of Lion Air Flight 610 in 2018 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in 2019, which together claimed 346 lives, were ultimately linked to the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS. This automated system, designed to push the aircraft's nose down to prevent a stall, repeatedly activated due to a single faulty sensor. Despite the pilot's desperate attempts to regain control, to fight against an unseen force, the system continued to push the nose down, ultimately sending both planes crashing straight into the ground. It was a terrifying realization, hundreds of lives lost simply because an algorithm, meant to enhance safety, had no readily apparent cancel button for the pilots in a critical emergency. Then there was the haunting case of Air France Flight 447 in 2009. The Airbus A330, en route from Rio de Janeiro to Paris, plunged into the Atlantic Ocean, killing all 228 on board. The cause? Frozen speed sensors that disoriented the autopilot system. In the ensuing confusion, the pilots, instead of pushing the nose down to gain speed, repeatedly pulled the aircraft's nose up, causing it to lose lift and enter an aerodynamic stall, a free fall from which they could not recover. The tragedy occurred not because of a mechanical failure of the aircraft's core components, but because a minor, initial technical glitch, combined with pilot error in a highly stressful and confusing situation, sent the plane plummeting. Similarly, Turkish Airlines Flight 1951, which crashed near Amsterdam in 2009, offered another stark lesson. A faulty altimeter sensor caused the autopilot system to prematurely reduce thrust when the aircraft was still hundreds of meters from the ground, incorrectly believing it was about to land. The pilots, failing to intervene in time, did not apply the necessary power, causing the plane to stall and crash just short of the runway, claiming the lives of 9 victims. These incidents, much like the sliding seat of AI-171, underscored a terrifying truth. Small, seemingly insignificant errors or design oversights could, under the wrong circumstances, trigger a cascade of events leading to unimaginable loss. However, despite the compelling evidence pointing towards the sliding seat as the primary catalyst for AI-171, not everyone immediately accepted this narrative. Besides the analyses based on the black box data, some experts proposed bolder, and perhaps even more frightening, hypotheses: deliberate sabotage. Among these, the opinion of Mr. Jadav, a former technical advisor to a major Indian airline, was particularly noteworthy. He expressed skepticism that the entire accident could be solely attributed to a malfunctioning seat. According to him, some sensitive electronic systems, such as GPS navigation systems or automatic navigation networks, could absolutely be jammed or remotely interfered with if they fell into the hands of sufficiently skilled individuals with clear objectives. This theory, while chilling, did come with a crucial caveat from Jadav himself. Aircraft engines, he admitted, could not be shut down remotely. The engine's mechanical protection mechanisms, he has cited, were completely independent, meaning even if the control software was compromised, the crew should still be able to restart or make an emergency landing if basic systems remained functional. Immediately after the AI-171 tragedy, another theory began to circulate widely among experts, particularly some Indian aviation specialists. Could the aircraft have collided with birds just seconds after takeoff? This was not considered a far-fetched scenario. During the critical takeoff phase, if even one bird is sucked into an engine intake, it can cause significant damage. If both engines were affected simultaneously, it would indeed be an unavoidable disaster. This argument was not without basis. In the past, a plane crash on Jeju Island, South Korea, was suspected to have been caused by birds flying into the air intakes, stopping the propulsion system just tens of seconds after takeoff, eerily similar to AI-171's timeline. Furthermore, the location of the accident lent credibility to this hypothesis, as Ahmedabad Airport is considered a notorious black spot for bird strikes, especially during the summer months. The state of Gujarat had, over many years, recorded at least hundreds of bird strike incidents, to the point where authorities had to issue a red alert for bird-related accidents. The sheer volume of such occurrences made the bird strike theory a compelling, if deeply unsettling, alternative explanation for the sudden loss of power on Flight 171. The horrifying conclusion that the Air India Flight 171 tragedy began with the pilot's seat itself, a seemingly innocuous component, sent shockwaves through the aviation world. Yet, for those steeped in the grim history of air disasters, this wasn't an entirely unprecedented scenario. Aviation history, a chronicle often written in blood and shattered metal, has recorded numerous accidents triggered by seemingly harmless actions, by technical details that, on the surface, appeared incapable of causing mass fatalities. These weren't always the grand, complex system failures one might imagine, but insidious weaknesses in the interwoven fabric of human interaction with advanced machinery, where minor oversight could unravel into utter catastrophe. A chillingly typical example, still fresh in the collective memory, is the saga of the Boeing 737 Maximum. The crashes of Lion Air Flight 610 in 2018 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in 2019, which together claimed 346 lives, were ultimately linked to the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS. This automated system, designed to push the aircraft's nose down to prevent a stall, repeatedly activated due to a single faulty sensor. Despite the pilot's desperate attempts to regain control, to fight against an unseen force, the system continued to push the nose down, ultimately sending both planes crashing straight into the ground. It was a terrifying realization, hundreds of lives lost simply because an algorithm, meant to enhance safety, had no readily apparent cancel button for the pilots in a critical emergency. The design, intended to be a safeguard, became a death trap when faced with erroneous input, highlighting the profound dangers of automation that overrides human command without clear, immediate disengagement. Then there was the haunting case of Air France Flight 447 in 2009. The Airbus A330, en route from Rio de Janeiro to Paris, plunged into the Atlantic Ocean, killing all 228 on board. The cause? Frozen speed sensors that disoriented the autopilot system. In the ensuing confusion, the pilots, instead of pushing the nose down to gain speed, repeatedly pulled the aircraft's nose up, causing it to lose lift and enter an aerodynamic stall, a free fall from which they could not recover. The tragedy occurred not because of a mechanical failure of the aircraft's core components, but because a minor, initial technical glitch, combined with pilot error in a highly stressful and confusing situation, sent the plane plummeting. It was a stark reminder that even the most experienced crews could be overwhelmed by unexpected, conflicting data and automated responses. Similarly, Turkish Airlines Flight 1951, which crashed near Amsterdam in 2009, offered another stark lesson in the fragility of complex systems. A faulty altimeter sensor caused the autopilot system to prematurely reduce thrust when the aircraft was still hundreds of meters from the ground, incorrectly believing it was about to land. The pilots, failing to intervene in time, did not apply the necessary power, causing the plane to stall and crash just short of the runway, claiming the lives of 9 victims. These incidents, much like the sliding seat of AI-171, underscored a terrifying truth. Small, seemingly insignificant errors or design oversights could, under the wrong circumstances, trigger a cascade of events leading to unimaginable loss, often exacerbated by the unexpected interaction between human response and automated systems. However, despite the compelling evidence pointing towards the sliding seat as the primary catalyst for AI-171, not everyone immediately accepted this narrative. The sheer unlikeliness of such a simple mechanical failure leading to such a catastrophic outcome fueled alternative theories. Besides the analyses based on the black box data, some experts proposed bolder, and perhaps even more frightening, hypotheses: deliberate sabotage. Among these, the opinion of Mr. Jadav, a former technical advisor to a major Indian airline, was particularly noteworthy. He expressed skepticism that the entire accident could be solely attributed to a malfunctioning seat. According to him, some sensitive electronic systems, such as GPS navigation systems or automatic navigation networks, could absolutely be jammed or remotely interfered with if they fell into the hands of sufficiently skilled individuals with clear objectives. This theory, while chilling in its implications, did come with a crucial caveat from Jadav himself. Aircraft engines, he admitted, could not be shut down remotely. The engine's mechanical protection mechanisms, he has cited, were completely independent, meaning even if the control software was compromised, the crew should still be able to restart or make an emergency landing if basic systems remained functional. This distinction was vital, as it meant any sabotage would have had to target something beyond just the engine's direct control. Immediately after the AI-171 tragedy, another theory began to circulate widely among experts, particularly some Indian aviation specialists. Could the aircraft have collided with birds just seconds after takeoff? This was not considered a far-fetched scenario, especially given the context. During the critical takeoff phase, if even one large bird is sucked into an engine intake, it can cause significant damage, leading to a loss of thrust. If both engines were affected simultaneously, it would indeed be an unavoidable disaster, leaving pilots with virtually no time or altitude for recovery. This argument was not without basis. In the past, a plane crash on Jeju Island, South Korea, was suspected to have been caused by birds flying into the air intakes, stopping the propulsion system just tens of seconds after takeoff, eerily similar to AI-171's timeline. Furthermore, the location of the accident lent significant credibility to this hypothesis, as Ahmedabad Airport is considered a notorious black spot for bird strikes, especially during the summer months. The state of Gujarat had, over many years, recorded at least hundreds of bird strike incidents, to the point where authorities had to issue a red alert for bird-related accidents. The sheer volume of such occurrences made the bird strike theory a compelling, if deeply unsettling, alternative explanation for the sudden, catastrophic loss of power on Flight 171, prompting a deeper look into the environmental factors at play. The black box data had laid bare the sequence of events with chilling precision. The sudden, inexplicable backward lurch of the captain's seat, followed by the catastrophic pulling back of the thrust levers. While the initial focus had been on the mechanical failure of the seat's locking pin, the deeper, more unsettling truth that emerged from the investigation pinpointed the true trigger of the crash, the captain's unconscious, instinctive action. It was a natural, almost primal reflex, a desperate attempt to regain balance and stability in a moment of extreme, unexpected disequilibrium. Imagine the scene in the cockpit, captured in the cold, hard data of the flight recorder. The Boeing 787 is in its critical takeoff phase, engines roaring, the aircraft gaining speed and altitude. Suddenly, Without warning, the very foundation of the pilot's control, his seat, slides sharply backward by nearly 30 centimeters. In that fraction of a second, as his body is thrown off balance, his natural, involuntary response is to reach out, to grasp for something solid, anything to steady himself. And tragically, fatally, his hands found the thrust levers. These levers, positioned precisely where a pilot's hands would instinctively go for support or control, were at maximum thrust for takeoff. The unexpected backward pull by the unconscious pilot, a reflex born of pure survival instinct, caused the thrust levers to snap back all the way. In just an instant, both engines, the immense powerhouses propelling the Dreamliner skyward, were brought to idle. They shut down immediately. This revelation brought a new, profound layer of understanding to the tragedy, shifting the focus from a simple mechanical failure to a complex interplay between human physiology under stress and a critical design oversight. According to documents provided by a former Boeing design expert, a deeply unsettling concern had long simmered within the industry: the possibility of pilots unintentionally pulling the thrust levers in situations of bodily imbalance. Many engineers had expressed these concerns, recognizing that in unexpected scenarios, a sliding seat, sudden severe turbulence, or even a violent tremor, a pilot's natural reflex could indeed lead to erroneous actions, specifically causing an unintended engine shutdown. The core of this critical design flaw, as highlighted by the investigation, lay in the thrust lever mechanism itself. The system for transitioning thrust levers from takeoff to idle, despite its immense importance in flight control, currently lacked a physical safety lock. There was no mechanical safeguard, no interlock, no physical barrier that would prevent the levers from being pulled back to idle in an emergency or an instinctive, unintended movement. This meant that a pilot's natural, unthinking reflex in a moment of chaos could, with terrifying ease, override the intended operational state of the engines. It was a gaping vulnerability, a blind spot in the design philosophy that assumed conscious, deliberate input even in the most disorienting circumstances. A former FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, supervisor, speaking with a bluntness born of years of experience, articulated the gravity of this oversight. If you let a multimillion-dollar aircraft have both engines shut down just because of an instinctive reflex, then the fault is not with the pilot. The fault is with the design. This statement resonated deeply, cutting through the noise of blame and speculation. It argued that the design itself was inherently flawed if it allowed a natural human reaction, however unintended, to lead to such catastrophic consequences. Furthermore, the supervisor added a chilling qualifier, and if they were warned, that's a systemic fault. This implied a far more egregious failure, suggesting that the manufacturer might have been aware of this potential vulnerability but failed to act, a profound disregard for safety that transcended mere oversight. The implications were staggering. If lawsuits could prove that Boeing had indeed received technical warnings about this specific design vulnerability but failed to implement improvements or update safety protocols, the corporation could face not only severe civil penalties but also extensive investigations in multiple countries. The legal and ethical ramifications would be immense, potentially dwarfing previous scandals. The argument was clear. The pilot, in that terrifying 15th second, was not making a conscious decision to shut down the engines. He was reacting, instinctively, to a sudden, violent displacement caused by a faulty component. The aircraft's design, by not incorporating a physical safeguard against such an instinctive, yet destructive, input, effectively turned a survival reflex into a death sentence. This chapter, therefore, serves as a stark reminder of the delicate and often unforgiving interface between human and machine in aviation. It underscores that even the most advanced technology must anticipate and mitigate human factors, particularly in high-stress, unexpected scenarios. The tragedy of Air India Flight 171, in this light, became a chilling case study of how a seemingly minor mechanical flaw, combined with a critical design oversight that failed to account for natural human instinct, could lead to an irreversible chain of events, transforming a routine takeoff into an unimaginable disaster. The fault, the investigation suggested, lay not with the pilot's skill or intent, but with a design that left a fatal window open for human reflex to become the ultimate, unintended trigger of catastrophe. Even as the charred wreckage of Air India Flight 171 lay as a grim testament to the catastrophe, and as the victims' families grappled with unimaginable grief, the silence from one key player was deafening. Boeing, the titan of the global aviation industry, offered no satisfactory answers. There was no immediate explanation for the seat mechanism's failure, no clear commitment to review the technical design, and certainly no public acknowledgement of a potential flaw that had cost over 200 lives. This controversial silence, in the face of such profound tragedy and mounting evidence from the black box, rapidly fueled widespread public outrage, giving birth to a scathing narrative that quickly dominated social media: the $1 million seat. The anger rippled across international aviation circles. Experts, usually measured in their public statements, could barely conceal their frustration. We are talking about an aircraft manufacturer worth hundreds of billions of dollars. One prominent aviation analyst lamented, his words echoing the sentiments of many, and they cannot even utter a single word about why their seat killed hundreds of people. The criticism was pointed, drawing painful parallels to Boeing's past. This was not the first time the company had chosen silence, or at least a prolonged period of deflection, in the face of a tragedy potentially linked to its design. After the two horrific accidents involving the 737 MAX, which collectively claimed 346 lives, it took Boeing more than a year to finally admit that the MCAS system's design was a contributing factor to the tragedy. Now, as the world looked at AI-171, a chilling question hung in the air. Were they once again choosing to wait, to hope for public opinion to die down, before grudgingly acknowledging their role, or worse, doing nothing at all? The financial implications of the tragedy were staggering, a stark illustration of how a seemingly minor flaw could decimate an asset of immense value. The Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner that crashed on the ill-fated AI-171 flight was no ordinary aircraft. It was the pride of Air India's international fleet, a flagship asset deployed for long-haul intercontinental routes. Each Dreamliner of this type costs between 125 and 175 million US dollars, equivalent to over 1,000 billion Indian rupees. Yet, this entire multi-million-dollar asset was reduced to ashes, not by a complex, high-tech malfunction, but by a small error in the captain's seat, a minor component costing less than 10,000 US dollars. The stark contrast between the negligible cost of the faulty part and the monumental loss it inflicted served as a bitter indictment. According to the New India Express, the hull damage, the portion typically covered by insurance, was estimated at around 80 million US dollars. But that, as legal experts grimly noted, was just the tip of the iceberg. The costs would also include passenger liability compensation, which was expected to range from 30 to 50 million US dollars. Beyond that, individual claims from victims' families and ground casualties could easily exceed 100 million US dollars. The Tata Group, Air India's parent company, had announced a temporary assistance of 10 million rupees, approximately 116,000 US dollars, for each victim's family, a gesture of goodwill in the immediate aftermath. However, legal experts swiftly warned that the final figure would be much, much higher. A lawyer definitively stated that both Air India and Boeing could face unlimited legal liability unless they could definitively prove they were entirely faultless in the catastrophe. The question then became, how could Boeing possibly claim to be faultless when a pilot seat, a seemingly simple component integral to flight control, could slide freely and trigger a fatal incident? If the pilot seat error was indeed determined to be the proximate cause, as the black box data strongly suggested, Boeing would face unlimited liability. The financial consequences this time around, many predicted, might not be any less severe than what the company endured in the aftermath of the 737 MAX crisis, a period that saw billions wiped off its market value and its reputation severely tarnished. However, the legal battle had only just begun. Victim families were being advised by legal counsel not to rush into accepting any initial compensation offers. The evidence was still being clarified, and the final compensation amount could be substantially higher if they chose to pursue legal action in international jurisdictions, especially within the United States, where personal injury and wrongful death lawsuits often yield far greater settlements. The tragedy of AI-171 was not merely the end of a flight. It was a harsh, unforgettable warning for an entire industry that operates on the fragile boundary of human and technology. Over 200 lives were erased by a physical movement lasting less than half a second. It was a chilling testament to how a series of small, seemingly insignificant errors, a seat not properly inspected, a locking pin overlooked in a technical checklist, a natural reflex in a moment of chaos, could, when intertwined, decide the fate of hundreds of people. In aviation, everything is a link in an operating system that cannot afford even a 0.1 millimeters error. The captain's seat, in its essence, was not the culprit. It was the manufacturer's disregard for documented warnings and the absence of fundamental safety interlocks that allowed this unimaginable tragedy to occur. When everything else became wreckage and ash, the black box remained, a silent, incorruptible witness to an accident that, in truth, should have never happened in the first place, its decoded secrets screaming a lesson that the industry could ill afford to ignore.